What is up, guys? Archon tonight I'm bringing you guys another YouTube video. In today's video we're going to be going over the World of Warcraft hotfix for February 1st. Typically I don't cover hotfixes if they're just minor changes. Like last week there were some major changes, so I covered it, and today is the same thing. There's some major changes coming down the pipeline, so we're going to cover those as well. These don't go live until the 2nd after the restart happens, so do keep that in mind. Frost Death Knight is up first. All damage abilities increase by 5%. Frost has been near the bottom of the pack, bottom to middle. This should probably put them closer to the middle of the pack now. Not sure if it affects the two-handed Frost viability, because I know right now Blizzard's having trouble keeping both the one-hander and the two-hander builds viable. It's almost like they don't want to buff the two-hander too much, because they want the one-hander to be the more viable of the two. But we'll have to see what happens. Personally, I'd like to see them go out of their way to maybe make the two-hander an obliteration type build, and then have the one-hander be the Breath of Sindragosa build. But again, we'll have to see how all that plays out throughout the rest of Shadowlands. Demon Hunter Havoc. All damage abilities increase by 3%. So Havoc has been struggling on single target. I think they're pretty good on AoE still, especially with the Covenant Chaos brand. Not Chaos brand. What is it called? I can't think of what it's called. They have like some brand that they can get. I think it's from the Venthyr, and it does quite a bit of damage. But I do think that their single target did need a bit of a buff, and this should help in that category, while not making them too OP for AoE still. Hunter, Beast Mastery. All damage abilities increase by 5%. So Beast Mastery had some problems transitioning to Shadowlands from BFA. It went from being a very, top spec for Hunter to, I think, the bottom now. I think it's actually less than Survival. Or maybe in the middle and Survival maybe last. I'm not too sure, because you really don't see too many Survival Hunters, so the numbers are very hard to get for that. As for Survival, it is also being increased by 5%. And I will say, I do run keys with a Survival Hunter. I think the AoE for Survival was fine. The single target may need some help, and I think this will help out immensely with that. Same thing for the Demon Hunter. This is more towards, buffing their single target, I think, than their AoE. Mage, Frost, with regional restarts, all damage abilities increase by 3%. So Frost Mage was definitely also in the category where it just didn't make the transition from Shadowlands to... Or sorry, it didn't make the transition from BFA to Shadowlands. Paladin, Shadow Resistance Aura will no longer be removed from the Paladin when they die. No idea what that is. Rogue Assassination. All damage abilities increase by 5%. Pretty much the same thing for both Hunter and Mage. Assassin's been struggling to find its place in Shadowlands. You mostly see Outlaw as well as Sub-Rogue now. Shaman's up next. Enhancement. All damaging abilities increase by 3%. I think Elemental Shaman is okay right now. They're still trying to fiddle with the rotation, I think. People are still trying to figure it out. I think most of them maybe have what they need down, whereas I think Enhancement was still struggling. But this should help them get where they need to be. Warlock fixed an issue where Resolute's Barrier Conduit effect could be placed on cooldown when the Warlock took damage lower than 5% of their maximum health. I guess that's a good fix. Destruction, all damage abilities increase by 5%. Again, you don't really see Destruction Warlocks, you see mostly Demo and Affliction, mostly Affliction. Okay. Warrior Arms, all damage abilities increase by 3%. And Master and Commander PvP talent reduces the cooldown of Rallying Cry by 60 seconds, was 120, so it's kind of a nerf for PvP. Fury, all damage abilities increase by 3%. Again, the same thing for arms, nerf for PvP. Covenant's Night Fae, when Pod Tender's Dreamweaver Soulbind is triggered, the player inside the pod will be dropped from targeting. So it basically wow, okay, it's not even a shadow meld. That's interesting. Oh no, never mind, I get what it's saying, never mind. The enemy doesn't drop the targeting, you can't target the player that's in the pod, so if one of your allies goes into the pod, you can't spam heals on them because they look low. Got it. To help with locating easier, the Pod Tent or Dreamweaver Soulbind nameplate will now appear as a white player nameplate rather than a red minion nameplate. Yeah, that's probably good. That definitely helps. And as for the big changes here, there's more dungeon changes with Mythic Keystones. So I mentioned in last week's video that they needed to nerf Tyrannical for Sanguine Depths because the second boss in there, it's like a tank truck. And this is kind of a hit to the Tyrannical. Not the one I would have preferred, but it is a hit nonetheless. Bosses now gain 30% health when Tyrannical is active. It used to be 40%, so bosses are losing 10% health. Again, I would prefer it come from the damage side more than the health side. I'm fine with hitting on a brick wall for, 20 minutes, as long as that brick wall doesn't fall on me and crush me instantly. The other side, headless client melee damage reduced by 40% and discharge damage reduced by 33%. It's the little robots that spin around and do the little whirlwind after you fight the dog inside of the Mechagon section of the other side. 4RF's metallic jaws deal damage reduced by 33%, and Wolf now prefers non-tank targets. So basically, the Wolf is the giant blue circle that stuns you and knocks you to the ground. It used to target everybody, but now it only will target DPS and healers. Atari Deathwalker melee damage reduced by 25%, and Gushing Wounds is cast less frequently. That's the dude that does the whirlwind inside of the Hakar section. So basically what these changes are directed towards is that they want tanks to actually be able to sit there and tank instead of having to kite constantly. I did notice that that is a major issue. Well, I wouldn't even say it's really an issue, it's just more of an advanced thing that tanks would have had to learn how to deal with. Compared to like BFA and other expansions before it, where in Mythic Plus you typically don't see tanks run out on like a 9 or a 10 to avoid a bunch of damage coming their way. So I'm fine with the changes. I think this is going to be good for tanks, especially Blood DK, who do struggle from time to time with taking a lot of hits like this. Missed a Tyrannocyte, the Druss Soul Cleaver's Soul Split damage reduced by 40%. This is huge. If you don't get the Soul Cleavers down immediately in a pack, you pretty much wipe. Your tank just explodes. It hits the tank for 50 to 60% of his HP between the two, and they do cast it quite frequently. So if you're not on your game, you get popped, you're just gonna go down. So they cut the damage basically in half, so healers should be able to keep up with it. Tanks should be able to actually sit there and tank these mobs instead of having to run away from them so that they don't get popped. Plaguefall. Rotting Slime Claws, Corroded Claws damage reduced by 50%. Trying to think of the Rotting Slime Claws, like what they are. Off the top of my head, I don't really recall the Rotting Slime Claws. Unless they're in the pack with, or right outside of Icus. I think they're in the pack outside of Icus. Or a pack or two, depending on what route you take. Sanguine Depths. Chamber Sentinel Severing Slice, initial damage reduced by 50%. This is big because you still take the bleed for the full amount, but instead of getting hit for, 30-40% and then take the bleed, you're going to lose a lot less HP and while you have the bleed on you, so your healer can get you up, and maybe you can do a pull with the Gargoyle as well now, and not have to worry about dying, so you can actually pull more trash with the Gargoyle. The thought. Frenzied Ghouls cast Shadow Claws less frequently. Insatiable Brutes, slam damage reduced by 21%, and is cast less frequently. So those would be the big guys the big blue guys you run into in the hallway that jump across the room and stuff. Well, this is actually really big too because he heals whenever he deals damage by a certain percent. So for this to be reduced by 21%, that means he's healing for 21% less whenever he does it. And it's also cast less frequently. Spires of Ascension, Ether Divers cast Insidious Venom less frequently. Okay, this is another one that really hurts on Fortified, because there's like 5 or 6 of them in a pack after you take the Angel across to the other section. I think it's after the first boss. They can get really bad if you don't have stuns and interrupts and, just hard CC to deal with them. Because if they focus one person down, because I think they random target, and if they focus one person, they just melt them instantly. So this is pretty good to know that they're not going to be casting as much. This means that the tank can hold aggro a bit better because they'll be meleeing him. Forsworn Kyrion's Dark Lash cast time increased to 2 seconds. It was 1.5. Another healthy change. I think that this will get a couple more interrupts for Dark Lash than otherwise would be with a 1.5 second. Dark Lash does hurt a bit. They do the Forsworn Doctrine or whatever as well, and that needs to be interrupted because I think it either heals or deals a lot of damage. I can't remember fully. I know Forsworn Doctrine needs to be interrupted, and it is cast by the Kyrian the Kyrian Forsworn or whatever. Sorry. The Necrotic Wake. Zolaramus Bonecarver's Bone Flay bleed damage reduced by 70%, and the duration reduced to 10 seconds was 20. So these would be the guys in the last video that I thought were the guys at the end of the bridge after the first boss there, where you go across and you have to interrupt one, or otherwise it fears the party. These would be those guys. So their bleed's been reduced by 70%, and the duration of the bleed damage is only 10 seconds. So it should help your tank stay alive a lot better. Again, these are all basically directed towards tanks. Fixed an issue where Zolaramus's Bone Carver's Bone Flay bleed damage was reduced by armor. Gonna be interesting to see how this change plays out now. Because if the bleed was being reduced by armor, how much of that was actually being reduced? Versus how much, is the 70% gonna change? I wonder if it maybe it's a net even, where it doesn't actually change anything. Skeleton Marauders cast Gruesome Cleave less frequently. Theater of Pain, unyielding contenders, vicious strike damage reduced by 20%. Ossify conscripts cast Cruel Slash less frequently. Developers note, we've noticed tanks in Mythic Keystone dungeons feeling pressured to spend more time running away than actually tanking than we'd like. In an effort to address this, we're dialing back the tank damage of a number of dungeons denizens who've proven to be particularly painful. So like I said, this was mostly to fix tanks having to kite more than what they wanted. And then the stuff down here is just Vandus Runes plus 60 on versatility from where it was for Nathria. Fix an issue where the Trent Sprout summoned from Treecorn was missing all of its attacks, and fix an issue that would provide too much quest credit for a Cult of Passion when Kintara was defeated. So again, the reason I covered this is more so for a follow-up to the dungeons. The class changes were good too. Nobody got nerfed, everybody's getting buffed. I like that. I like patch notes like that where, classes are only getting buffed. I think that's healthier than nerfing everything down to the ground. As for the tanks, I think that they're going to find a better place in the Shadowlands dungeons. They're going to feel a lot more, active, I guess, in being able to face tank things instead of having to constantly run away and kite. Like I mentioned before, for Blood DK, it's pretty terrible. They take a lot of damage, and it doesn't feel good. So I'm glad to see some of the hard-hitting mobs get nerfed a bit. It'll give Blood a chance to actually shine a bit, instead of, having a dead tank on your hands whenever he gets hit by a Soul Cleave from Tyrna Scythe. Anyways, guys, what do you guys think of the changes? Do you guys agree that these are good changes? Do you guys think that they're bad changes? Well, let me know down below. You guys want better changes for the class balancing? What do you guys think that your class needs if these aren't enough for you? Let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.